look at some of the background. First of all, we're going to talk about Alexander Placide, which we do not have an image of him, although he was, at the time, arguably the most famous actor in the United States of America. So, a little bit of background on Placide. He was a famous actor in France. Not only was he an actor, but he was good at pantomime, and he was an acrobat. Known specifically for tightrope walking, which is fascinating. He was also a very good ballet dancer, and he was born into a family of entertainers, and he would continue, obviously, in the family's business. In fact, he even spent 5 years in London, where he entertained John Adams, who possibly, I'm not 100% sure, but was possibly the first, if not definitely one of the first Americans to ever see him perform. However, things got a little heated in France with the French Revolution coming up, so Placide left France and first goes to the Caribbean, where he's performing in French colonies. Then he comes to the United States, and he travels from New York all the way down to South Carolina in several different, all the major cities, performing for the wealthy and the commoners alike. Eventually, he ends up in South Carolina for a while, where he is one of the proprietors of the more popular theater then. I believe it was called the Charleston Theater. There were 2 or 3 that popped up, and then they all conglomerate together. And he, Placide, runs those theaters for a while. Now, eventually, by 1811, he's getting older and he's not very well. And he ends up going to Richmond to do some performances, where he actually becomes friendly with a young woman named Eliza Poe. And if that name rings a bell, it's the mother of Edgar Allan Poe. Now, while Edgar Allan Poe was still just a child, Placide becomes friendly with Eliza Poe, and they perform together, but Poe becomes very sick, and they do several benefits on her behalf while the leading up to the fire. But in fact, Placide becomes sick also, so they end up having this benefit for him. Sadly, Eliza Poe, mother of Edgar Allan Poe, dies, and that pushes this particular performance for the benefit of Placide back a little bit. 3 days, in fact, to the day after Christmas. Now, they do have this performance. Sadly, when they have this performance, the building does catch fire. The way it catches fire is there was scenery that would be lowered and raised by children. Young boys were actually doing the lowering and raising, and one of the set pieces, back before there was electricity, was a chandelier with lit candles in it. And they pull up the candles, and it gets a little jammed, and the kid tugs on it, and that makes it sway, and it catches other set pieces that are hanging from the rafters on fire. Now, this kid sees it and is just a boy, so he runs away. As he runs away, well, the whole building catches fire, all the set pieces. Now, it's hard for the audience to see it first, and when they do see it, they think it's just part of the show, until someone eventually runs on stage and says, "Hey, the set's on fire." And everyone goes, "Oh no," and panics, because back then there were not a lot of fire exits. There was a main entrance and exit on the ground floor, and then there was an exit behind the stage for the actors, and then there was a second floor balcony for the black citizens of Richmond, who were, of course, supposed to sit in a different area. So, as the times were. The building catches fire, and people, 600 people in an old wooden building try and exit, and they exit the best they can. And we are going to talk a little bit about a few examples of heroics and some sadness as we go along. Like I said, it's a little bit of a theme today. Eventually, the roof collapses in, and 72 people are killed. Now, Placide does survive, and his daughter, I believe it was Jane Placide, actually ends up to be one of the most all of his kids end up being actors, but his daughter Jane ends up being one of the most famous actors of the early half of the 19th century in America, spending a lot of time traveling the South, be really the number one traveling actress of the South at a time where theater was mostly traveling. There were not a ton of theaters, although I should note that Alexander Placide's role in Charleston made Charleston one of the top hubs of theater in early America. So that's essentially the outline of the story. It's a horrible tragedy. Everyone in Richmond, and again, Richmond is the capital of Virginia, the most popular, wealthy, important state at the time. James Madison is president. He just followed Jefferson, and he would be followed by Monroe. Washington was not long before. This is Virginia we're talking about. And everyone of prominence in Virginia was affected. Many famous people we've talked about here. St. George Tucker escaped barely with his life. A lot of names are escaping me now that I read through, because there was half of Virginia's society. The elites were there, but also many commoners, because 600 people is a ton of people. So that is the basic story of Alexander Placide. He would go to New York shortly thereafter and die just a few months later of the sickness that was ailing him. Unfortunately, I was unable to determine what sickness the benefit was for, but he dies very shortly thereafter of the ailment he was suffering from. So, that is Alexander Placide. And wrong